competitions and communication.
Okay.
You wanna do-
I was just going to mention again the Swimming for All program, which people can, which is a I don't know exactly how to articulate it, but it's basically, we want all children in the village who want to come to the swimming pool and their families to, and if affordability is at all an issue, it's a reduced cost for your tickets, and you can take care of that at the pool.
And I also understand the swimming lessons are free, right? That's funded by the Community Foundation.
I believe that is correct, but I
Yeah,
would have
so
to double check to be.
I do know that's true.
Cool.
And the pool is looking pretty cool.
Yeah, the pool looks
There were a
great.
lot of people there yesterday. That's nice.
And we are open every day now, right?
We are open every day.
Great. I also do want to announce we are again successfully live streaming our meeting. I just checked. It says live now on our community access Yellow Spring station. I believe there was a post on Facebook, but you can just go to our YouTube station now. It's linked off of the website, and you can watch us in real time. Lisa, Kevin, any other announcements?
Did anyone have any problems with the packets?
I don't think so.
Next
Oh,
time, better
part of-
not to just staple it all
Oh.
together.
I was going to say, I really like this stapled together. It keeps everything.
So
Yeah, that
Judith likes staples.
Okay.
And I don't know if it was me, Patty, but your manager's report was, some of the letters were missing. It might have just been me, though, on my
I-
computer.
I did notice that, actually.
Sometimes when you PDF the packet and combine the files, it does that. I have it
Okay.
periodically with mine, but.
Okay,
Yeah, I think it's our PDF program here.
okay.
Well, I did want to mention, since we will not be having a meeting before then, that Street Fair is coming up. All right, so we're going to see lots of folks here on Saturday. And I also wanted to give a shout out to Antioch College because the students have organized a Music on Main. That means they're going to be doing something at the main building, lots of great music. This is kind of a after party for Street Fair, and they're encouraging the community to come and enjoy that celebration. Yeah. Also, if you hadn't heard, Yellow Springs is the 18th bicycle-friendly community in Ohio, which is pretty incredible. We applied for this several months ago. It's going to be a big deal. We're going to have signs up and let people know about that, but we are by far the smallest municipality. I looked, most of them are 20,000 or above. It's like Cleveland, Columbus, and so that was pretty awesome. So next year, we're bronze now, so we can apply and keep on improving with our active transportation plan and be the first in Ohio to get silver.
Excellent.
All right. And Lisa, do you want to, I don't know that we really highlighted the VITA award. Should we, do you want to mention just that?
Yeah, we talked about it a little at the last meeting, but we have a nice photograph about
Almost there.
Sorry.
the Lynch Lapides being the most recent honorees of the VITA Award for their contributions to public art in the village. And the VITA Award is an award that's determined by people being nominated. Anybody in the community can nominate someone or a group or a business or some entity for a VITA Award. And then it comes to the Art and Culture Commission for discussion, and we try to move it around as often as seasonally. But this was the most recent award, and you can see it there in that picture. And the award, a little ceremony, was well attended by members of the commission and the mayor. So, yeah, it was great.
Cool. All right. And Patty, do you want to just say something about the game that our staff played with the gallery?
Absolutely. There was a really cool game that Nancy Mellon, I guess, came up with.
And
on
Kathy
beha-
Moulton.
And Kathy Moulton on behalf of the Arts and Culture Commission. And what it was is it had small squares from each of the exhibits, the banners or the other exhibits that are hanging in the John Bryan Community Gallery. And the staff had to go around and find which piece of art that came from and turn in an entry. And then Brian and the rest of the Arts and Culture Commission provided prizes for those who participated at a cookout that I personally supplied the money for. Yes, auditors, I supplied it, not the village. And it was a really good time, and unfortunately, the notice was a bit late for some of the Arts and Culture Commission members to attend, but the staff had a really good time. We really enjoyed it.
Yeah, we got about 25% of the staff participated,
Mm-hmm.
which I thought was great for the first time around.
And, yeah, and we're also doing staff picks, which you see out in the hallway that Judy and I have done our staff picks, but we've had a couple of other staff members in the meantime say that they would also like to do
Yeah, I thought that
staff
was
picks. So that is continuing to grow as well.
Yeah. So it's nice to see our village team interacting with our community. Okay, so with that, let's review the agenda and anything that needs to change. Yes, Judy?
I had a couple of things. I wondered, well, first of all, on the old business, I wondered if we could put utility roundup behind the forgive the first late fee, because they seem to be, they're both about affordability, are they not? It seemed related to me when I was thinking about what I might say. And then I wondered if we could add, the mayor's court recommendation number 1, there's just a question to clarify for JSTF, so we can move forward on our work on that.
Where is that?
Just, you want to add that to old business?
I just want to add it.
Yep, okay.
But yeah, I was just thinking if we put the
And where
forgiving
did
the
you-
forgiving the first late fee annually and the utility roundup right behind that, because to me, they seem related.
Okay. Anything else?
That's all I have.
I just have a nomination to add a new business for the planning commission alternate, or a planning commission alternate. Okay. So if there's nothing else on the agenda, let's talk about our petitions and communications, Marion.
All right. We had 2 letters from community members in support of Tobacco 21. One from Kirsten Bean and one from Cindy Seek. Both think there's compelling reasons for having the age limit for tobacco be 21. And just FYI, we are signing, it's a resolution, isn't it, supporting efforts to have that be adopted at the state level.
Mhm. We're going to talk about that today, yeah.
Yeah. We had a letter from Becky Campbell concerned about the possibility of a marijuana dispensary at the old Yellow Springs Physicians building. And I've talked to Patty. I'll touch base with Becky.
Actually, those were announced today, and the company that applied with that building as a location did not get a license. So it is at this, at
It's
this
a
time,
moot
a
point.
moot point.
Okay, great, okay. Okay, I have all the bicycle
Yes.
friendly community stuff. And, let's see. Then we got a little notice about the Antioch College pilot project. Some of us went to that last Thursday. The Antioch College Village pilot project, and they are very interested in having people who are interested in being involved, whether they want to buy a house, partner, or invest. And then there was information about gun laws, and I'm not sure who put that in.
I put that in there, sorry. Yeah, normally, we would have added that to an updated agenda, who that came from, but, yeah, but since Judy's not here.
Well, Do you want,
Yeah, so, okay, the upshot is, I think it's important for us to look at what, as a local community, we can do to support a safer community and everything that's going on with gun violence and the lack of response from our state and federal legislators. The upshot of some that I've shared is that the state has been really successful at stopping municipalities from doing anything. Unlike, Kevin shared an article where communities in Illinois are banning, assault weapons and things, but our state law, they've really clamped down. That being said, certainly communities are paying attention to this. I think we should too. And if there are options like, what Cincinnati's talking about, that we look into that. The Vote 16 is something that, places like the Council and District of Columbia is doing. And based on us being a home rule state, even though they've taken our rights away to do a lot of things, they haven't yet with Vote 16. So that's an initiative that a lot are looking at. And so I thought maybe,
Can you just say in a sentence what that is?
yeah, so it means that you would extend voting privileges to 16-year-olds. And this has been tied into trying to make change happen. If we have more younger voters who, this is their future.
And this is something we can do as a municipality?
The research that's been done suggests that Ohio's one of the 10 states where it's possible
And-
because of our charter and
And that would allow 16 and older to vote in local elections?
local for sure. And some have actually been able to extend it even to state and federal. But yeah, so it would require looking at our charter. And so I thought that this would be good food for thought and that maybe on our, at our next meeting, if we have room on our agenda, we could talk about this a little bit more. But I wanted to prompt some of that thinking for ahead of time.
Thank you for bringing that stuff forward.
Yeah.
Yep.
It was illuminating and
Yeah.
kind of shocking, some of the laws.
Oh, yeah, it's crazy. But, I think at a minimum, we've done things like send to our state legislators, that we want action and,
So we could have the Vote 16 and gun control as at least a discussion.
yes.
Okay. So that is that was the petitions and communications. That was the folder.
All right. Thank you. Okay, so let's now get into our legislation, and we've got several second readings. Denise, do you want to say anything before we get into this? Maybe before we just introduce it, if you want to tell us what these three are about in brief.
There's three pieces of legislation, permitted signs. We have some, there are occasions where we have places in town, Friends Care Center, Millworks, 888 Dayton where the DMS is, where there's multiple like mixed developments going on there. And they need more signage. It even goes above and beyond what is really allowed in the zoning code. So we decided to add, planning commission decided to add a section that would allow the zoning administrator if a site visit determines that the location is not visible in the public streets or neighboring public property or streets, that we could allow some more signage. Usually these would be like directional.
Okay. All right, so we'll stop there, and Patty, could you read in ordinance 2018-22 by title only?
Yes, repealing section 12, I am missing some words on mine.
Yeah, that's
Permitted sign.
What is it?
permitted.
12, no, I need the section 1266. Repealing section 1266.03 permitted signs of the codified ordinances of the Village of Yellow Springs, Ohio, and enacting a new section 1266.03 permitted signs.
Okay. I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, and since this is the second hearing, I will open the public, or second reading, I'll open the public hearing. Questions or comments from council? Questions or comments from the public? Okay, if not, Patty, could you do the roll call, please?
Yes, Krieger,
Yes.
McQueen,
Yes.
Hempfling,
Yes.
Stokes,
Yes.
Hausch.
Yes. Okay, so then we've got ordinance 2018-23. Patty, you could read that again by title only, please?
Repealing section 1284.03 definitions CD of the codified ordinances of the Village of Yellow Springs, Ohio, and enacting a new section 1284.03 definitions CD.
Can I get a motion?
I move.
Second.
Okay. Denise?
And this, again, is just we're cleaning up the code. We don't really have a need for that gross density net in our definitions. We have a number of units per acre, and we've already put language in there for that, so.
Okay. All right, so again, it's a second reading, and I'll open the public hearing. Questions or comments from council? Questions or comments from citizens? All right, if not, Patty, the roll call, please.
McQueen,
Yes.
Stokes,
Yes.
Krieger,
Yes.
Hausch,
Yes.
Hempling.
Yes.
All right. And lastly, ordinance-wise, we've got 2018-24.
Sorry, I'm sorry, did you realize I didn't go further with that, but we did add just a density?
Yes.
Okay, all right, just, I didn't say that in my little,
Yeah. Well, your description was good. So, right, because we're doing the gross density now?
yes.
Yes. Okay. 2018-24 by title only?
Repealing section 1284.08 definitions RS of the codified ordinances of the Village of Yellow Springs, Ohio, and enacting a new section 1284.08 definitions RS.
Okay. Can I get a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Okay.
In the definitions of structures, solar panels would fall under that definition, but it isn't something you would normally think of as a structure. So we consider it to be an accessory structure, and I wanted to add that under that definition.
Okay. So again, second reading, opening the public hearing. I do have a question about that. So are we talking about solar panels that would also be installed on roofs? Or is this
Yes.
just?
Yes.
Okay.
If it's on a roof, if it has location on the ground, or if it's attached to something else that has location on the ground.
Right. Okay.
Yes.
So whether it's a separate structure or on my roof, and the motivation for covering this, can you tell us a little bit more about that
Well,
again?
accessory structures, probably at times takes more of a commitment from staff than even a regular structure is looking at setbacks and having to figure density. And we also have a solar interconnection agreement that
Mhm.
goes with that. So I felt that the solar interconnection agreement is really something that's done by the Public Works Director. It's an electrical field that he has to identify the power that's going through it. It's completely separate. I needed to tie those two things together somehow, and I felt the permit was the only way to do that.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great. Okay, so any other questions or comments from council? Questions or comments from citizens? All right, Patty, the roll call, please.
Stokes,
Yes.
McQueen,
Yes.
Hempling,
Yes.
Hausch,
Yes.
Krieger.
Yes.
Just wanted to say closing, I hope that this is probably it for maybe a month or two, but we've been pretty busy, and I had shared with Patty, and she suggested that I let you know that, I started in September of 2015, and closed out the year at 78 permits, and we've had 78 permits in the first 5 months this year.
Hmm.
That we've issued, so we are busy.
Wow.
busy. So thanks for that.
All right, thank you, Denise.
Thank you, Denise.
Okay, so now we'll turn to Resolution 2018-20. Patty, I guess, let's go ahead and read that in full, please.
Okay. Approving requested funds for boards and commissions for 2018. Whereas boards and commissions comprised of knowledgeable volunteers add capacity for the village to deliver on important goals and values, which realize significant economic, community, and quality of life benefits. And whereas the Council for the Village of Yellow Springs budgets a particular amount of funding for boards and commissions based on a first-come, first-served basis. And whereas the dollar amount for such boards and commissions for fiscal year 2018 was $25,000. And whereas 3 formal requests were made for budget, which include the Human Relations Commission for $8,500, the Arts and Culture Commission for $5,000, and the Planning Commission for $10,000. Now therefore be it resolved that the Village Council for the Village of Yellow Springs does hereby, Section 1, note the previous requests and formally authorize such budgets in the amount noted for the noted boards and commissions. And Section 2, instruct the Finance Director to make funding available under the conditions noted above.
Okay, thank you. I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second?
Okay, so I'll just introduce this briefly. We put this on the agenda for the auditors, just kidding. Actually, though, this is something that is important in our process, I believe, is that when we do appropriate and commit these funds, and I liked actually the definitions we got, so we can use the right language in the packet, that we do formalize that in a certain way. So these are requests that were already made and agreed upon, so this resolution formalizes those commitments. Any questions or comments? Okay. If not, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All right, and one more piece of legislation, 2018-21. We should also read that in full.
Supporting the health and welfare of our youth in relation to the use of tobacco and related products. Whereas the Council for the Village of Yellow Springs is deeply concerned about the health and welfare of our youth, and whereas it has been found that the use of tobacco and other related products severely impacts the lung health of users of those products, as well as of those in proximity to such users, and whereas it has been found that the earlier the use of such products begins, the more potent the ill effects may be, and whereas the Village of Yellow Springs has already proactively limited the use of tobacco products in our public spaces, and whereas the Village of Yellow Springs strongly supports statewide legislation restricting the use of tobacco and other related products to those 21 years of age and older that would encompass the entire population of the state of Ohio, and thereby promote the health and welfare of all of our young people. Now therefore be it resolved that the Council of the Village of Yellow Springs does hereby, Section 1, encourage and support the Greene County Department of Health to work with other county departments of health in lobbying our state legislators to enact such legislation statewide. Section 2, encourage all citizens and businesses to take action showing their support of such an initiative by contacting their state legislators regarding same. Section 3, the clerk of council is hereby directed to forward copies of this resolution to the appropriate legislators. Finally got that word right.
Nice job. Yeah, take some practice. I'd appreciate a motion.
I move.
Second.
Okay, so Patty, why don't you kind of tell us how we got to this resolution?
As everyone knows, 2 meetings ago, Sharnaz reporter from the health department came asking us to support legislation that would encompass only the municipal limits of the village that restricted the purchase of tobacco and related products to those 21 years of age and older. At the last meeting, we had several people speak out against such legislation as far as the economic impacts and the potential lack of effect that it would have in limiting it just simply to the limits of the village. So my suggestion as a compromise that would achieve both goals in some way was to support statewide legislation, because that way you can't run 5 minutes up the street and still buy your tobacco products.
Okay. Any questions or comments?
One of the reasons that I was, oh, I'm sorry.
I think, at least for myself, the reason why I did not support doing a village-wide ban on tobacco for people under 21 was I did find it compelling that what people, and some younger people that I talked to as well said, okay, they can just go up the road and get it. So for me, it was that more than the financial impact. I would put the health of our young people before the financial impact of the businesses, but in this case, it just didn't seem to make sense to me.
Mm-hmm. Lisa?
As I mentioned the last meeting, I spoke with a lot of people about this, people who smoke, people who didn't smoke, and just, it was the same as your experience, Marianne, that people were saying, it won't be able to make a difference. One of the things that I noticed, though, that even the business people who appeared before us at the last meeting, who were very much against Tobacco 21 because of the economic impact, said they would support a statewide initiative. So to me, that was powerful, and I think it was a great idea to come forward with this.
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely appreciate Greene County Public Health and Sharnaz presenting that information, not to mention the letters that were in the packet this time are really important, because they do actually indicate that this can be a deterrent, in some ways. But I did want to explain one comment that I made, because ultimately I was persuaded by the economic impact and the idea that it's very easy to leave Yellow Springs and go elsewhere for tobacco products. But one of the comments I made was that I do not believe that when people talk about having a right to smoke tobacco. And especially when you look at the billions of dollars that it costs health-wise and the other impacts that it has, I'm not persuaded by that at all. I mean, I think this is exactly the kind of thing that I would hope that our state legislators would address. And there are 10 other states that have done tobacco 21 statewide. So, okay. Anything else?
I was going to say, the one thing is, though, I mean, we know alcohol's in excess certainly is bad for people's health, but prohibition also did not work. So, you know, just, it caused other kinds of problems.
Right. Well, once you're 21, then.
Yeah, but I hear what you're saying.
Yeah. And I think it's good that we've done something in the vein, if you will, of common sense legislation, because, you know, really, quite honestly, both arguments are compelling. Both the economic impact and the health deterrent. Does Greene Health know about this resolution? Do they know that we've done this?
Shernaz was in the audience at the last meeting, so
You
I'm
mean
sure
this
that she does.
Yes, about the resolution?
Yes.
Okay.
Could send this to.
Yes.
Yeah. And I was also going to recommend when we send it to, you know, our usuals, Perales, Hackett, that we attach some of the information as well, that just kind of argues why this is such an important initiative. Maybe just a couple pages from Greene County, so they have the talking points.
I was going to say, I appreciated, Lisa, that you posted it on Facebook and asked for input. I thought that was very good.
Thanks.
Okay.
We need to vote yes.
A little bit. Yeah, I am reading it a little.
Any questions or comments from citizens?
Frequently, but keeping up.
Okay. If not, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right. Now, I'm guessing we don't have any citizen concerns. Yes, well, we have a couple. But I did want to mention here, because I thought about this last time, that the next time that we have a full room and it's clear lots of people want to speak, we are going to use the list. Because that was one thing I thought about that we could have done, is just get an idea of who's going to speak on a topic. Because we don't use that consistently. We don't need to use it tonight, obviously, but I want to make sure that we're fair in giving everyone a chance to
You'll
speak.
pass it around like
Yeah.
when the beginning
So
of
like,
a
if we see people
conversation.
coming in, we'll just make sure to ask them, are you planning to speak? If so, on what topic? And then we can see that.
And we were ready with the timer tonight, too.
Yes.
We
So
were ready with the timer, and there's nobody.
We will be more prepared for that in the
Well,
future.
maybe we can use it on ourselves.
There you go. Well, hey, we're a few minutes ahead tonight. But I do want, I just wanted to get, to mention that because I want anybody that comes to a meeting, you know, have something to say to get that opportunity, even if it means cutting the time shorter. Okay, so with that, we're going to move into special reports, and I'll have you guys come up and introduce yourselves, and it'd be great if you can come to the mic.
Thank you, Denise.
Thanks, Denise.
Well, thank you very much. My name is Mark Grube, and I'm with the accounting firm Julian & Group, and this is Bryce Frenzel, who was the leader on your audit. And we are an independent firm out of Westerville, and this is the 4th year of our 5-year contract. So basically what happens is the auditor estate lets out so many jobs a year to independent firms, and so actually it's kind of like a third-party contract for the auditor estate. So we'd like to thank you, the council, for having us in to do your audit. We greatly appreciate it. Bryce handed out a packet, or you've received a packet, and it'll say draft on it. The reason why that says draft is we have not filed it with the auditor estate. Once we do, they go through and review it, and it usually takes anywhere from 2 weeks to a couple months, just depending on what their workload is. And once it is certified by the auditor estate, it will be put on the auditor estate's website. And you can go back and check out any of your neighbors, or neighbors meaning neighboring governments, or Yellow Springs audits for as far back as in the 90s, I think they go back into that. So the first, if you open it up, the packet, that's why it says draft, because since they have not certified it by quality assurance, this is not a final product that can be released to anybody. Like I said, once we file it, they will go through, certify it, and then it can be released as public information. The first letter you see here is called the Independent Auditor's Report. That is our opinion on the financial statements that we were given to audit. These financial statements were given an unmodified opinion, which is a good opinion in the accounting world. What it means is that the numbers in here are not materially misstated, but it does not mean that every number is to the dollar correct for purposes of us rendering an opinion. If you turn the page over, I will tell you that because the village prepares their financial statements on a cash basis and it's a regulatory basis, which used to be okay by the Auditor of State's office, they now require villages to do generally accepted accounting principles, which is accrual-based. While they require it, they do allow you to do cash basis. So you get an adverse opinion saying you do not follow GAAP, but you get a modified opinion on the fact that you do cash under an allowable method. If you wanted to get rid of the adverse, you could do what is known as 34 lookalike cash basis. And it's something that we talked with Colleen about, and she could explain it to you. But it's a different method of reporting, which you could still do on a cash basis. And it would help you get rid of the adverse if it matters to you.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
With Patty, are there any, grant processes or anything, down the road where having an adverse report might be a negative?
Not that adverse report.
Okay.
Other adverse reports could affect that, but not that one, because we still use a method that's acceptable. It just isn't the one they would prefer we use.
That's
Okay.
So,
The only time that it would really, I think, ever affect you is if you were in the mode of getting a lot of federal grant money for, say, 3 years.
Mhm.
And this would be over $750,000 a year, because that's what would throw you into a single audit.
mhm.
The federal clearinghouse or the federal grants required you to do GAAP basis financial statements. Or you're always considered a high risk.
Mhm.
And what that means is instead of testing only 20% of your federal programs, you have to test 40.
Mhm.
So you could get lucky if you're one program, if you only had one program that was 40%, then you're still only having to test one program, so.
All right, okay.
Typically, I do not go through the numbers in your financial statements, because as the council, you're very familiar with the budget and everything in them, and they're already 5 months old. But if you would ever have any questions, or if you do, you can give it to us tonight, but if not, if you ever have any questions, please feel free to reach out to us. And as cash basis, like I said, those are the numbers you are approving through the budgetary process. And if you can go back, please, to page 16. Because you are a government, we have to do what is called a GAGIS letter. And this is a government letter that talks, what we do is we give, not an opinion, but we go through and talk about your internal controls over financial reporting. And if we see anything significant in here, we're required to report it to you under government auditing standards. And as well as on the next page 17 there, we talk about compliance and other matters. So some of the things we're required to test are in the Ohio Revised Code. And there's certain laws that you have to follow in relation to a financial audit. The one thing I always tell people is audits are not there to catch fraud. If you know of anything, always let us know. Most fraud is caught by usually it's collusion and one party feels like they're being left out of the fairness of it. But if anything does come to our attention, obviously we're required to look into it. And with that, we had a couple of findings. I'm gonna turn it over to Bryce and let him explain this to you.
So I think Melissa might have mentioned before she left, and drew everybody's attention to a thing that happened with the ODA projects for the water plant.
OPWC.
OPWC, there was a lot of funding through them. And what happens is they pay the contractors directly, so the money never actually comes to the village, but they pay it on behalf of the village. However, the village is still required to record those numbers in their accounting system. Those transactions weren't recorded, so what we did is we had to adjust the financial statements to reflect those amounts, and it just shows as loan proceeds and really capital outlay. It's kind of an in and out, simple transaction, but no money actually ever comes into the village's bank statements or bank accounts. So because that was a significant project that you guys took on, it was material to the financial statements, so we had to issue what is shown here as 2017-001 on page 18. Just the material weakness for financial statement presentation, because we did have to make multiple adjustments just to show that accurately. Kind of along with that, 2017-002 on the bottom half of that page, we gave material weakness non-compliance for OPWC on behalf of payments. And this citation kind of summarizes what the requirements are to record and the compliance guidelines for recording those types of transactions related to those projects, just that they're supposed to be recorded and then you're supposed to budget for them. So it's kind of an odd situation. It's not something that you guys deal with places. I mean, we've seen it before at other places. There's tools that I think both OWDA and OPWC have on their website. You can see the transactions, which I know I've shared those, kind of where we go to check and see what amounts should have been recorded for an entire year or on an individual transaction basis. And I forwarded those along, so that way going forward, things like that can be addressed or noticed sooner.
And Colleen and I have talked about that, and she has that information, so this year she will be recording that in and out appropriately. And you'll see it in supplemental appropriations, because it'll have to come as part of that.
Okay.
Other than that, any questions or?
I've never seen this reference with the conduit debt, and that was totally new to me, something that was done in 2002.
Where did you see that?
Is on page, which page is that? 10? Or no, my thing bounced too quick. Where is it? It's right before leases.
Yes.
11, sorry.
If you go to, so the auditor of state puts shells out that you use to put financial information into your notes, and it's right there, the draft were there, but the healthcare facility revenue refunding and improvement bonds for improvements, they must have gone through the village to get that debt, and it's the responsibility of the village. It would be for the healthcare facility.
Okay. So at that time, what the council would have agreed to do this just to facilitate their transaction, is that?
Yeah, maybe to help out, and not having done your audit in 2002, not sure what the thinking of it was, but it must have been thought that we could get these revenue bonds done through the village, it'll help the community out.
I
It's
see.
typically how they kind of.
So it might have some economic development impact or something?
Typically, that's.
Okay. Interesting.
But I think it goes through and states that it's not the village's debt.
Right,
Yeah.
right. Yeah, I just had never heard this.
Would be run
Talk-
care, do you think?
I guess
I
so.
would almost
That's-
have to
that's
be. I
what
don't
thought,
know,
so.
I don't know what else it would be.
And I guess since I raised it, this is something that municipalities do regularly, or?
You'll see, not a lot, But you'll see it some, I'm trying to think of some other examples, that, so sometimes you might see it for some libraries or, that they might go through school districts to get
Mm.
that, yeah, but I don't, it's not real common,
Okay.
yeah. I'm trying to think of some of them. You put me on the spot, but,
Well, how about like a public-private partnership or something? I mean, so like if the private was gonna build some kind of infrastructure or something and,
yeah, not too much there. I'm thinking some counties might do it for hospitals.
okay,
Where they would, the bonds would go through. The infrastructure, now they've set up more of these development authorities where they're going through and they're kind of, so it's kind of the same type of deal. They set up these development authorities and then the developers can go through these development authorities to issue bonds to put in all the infrastructures, pools.
Yeah.
And then as people move into the developments, they pay for it.
So like a port authority kind of thing.
Yeah,
The authority and the capacity to issue the bonds.
yes. I don't know, I see a ton of conduit debt, but, you know, out of the number of governmental agencies out there, you know, we audit a very small portion, so,
okay,
yeah.
all right. Any other questions?
Oh, well, I guess in regard to that, so that debt is still outstanding? Is that what that means?
Yes,
But it's not village
it's not
debt.
village debt.
We facilitated it, but we don't owe it.
Correct.
Okay.
All right. Okay, well, thank you so much,
Thank you.
and I guess we'll see you next year.
Yeah, thank you very much.
And
All right.
here is this, but you probably want Colleen to sign it at least. because-
Yeah.
All right.
It's a nice summary document, you know,
Yes.
to have all of the different accounts named and summarized.
Right, and, you know, and I think everybody knows, you know, we have the option to have this sort of exit presentation or not, but I thought it would be really good, because we've been through it before. All right,
And we had the option to have it in an executive session, which we did not because we value transparency, right?
definitely.
Thank you,
All right.
gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thanks
you.
again. All right.
Appreciate you.
Okay, well, I think we're ready to move into old business. And first of all, we have the proposal to forgive the first late fee annually. And Lisa, I'll let you
Yeah.
lead
let
that one
me-
off.
Let me get to my notes. I'm going to just talk off the top of my head while I scroll through here. So at the last meeting, I brought a recommendation that, you know, I have to say, I felt like it was a step back from prior recommendations that I've made to try to support affordability around utility costs. But as you recall, we were waiting for the budget from Johnny Burns and from Patty about the upcoming infrastructure costs. So it didn't make sense to plunge ahead not knowing very planfully what expenses we had coming up. But, you know, affordability is our number one focus. And so I brought a much smaller a proposal that came out of that utility analysis that was simply, I thought, to forgive the first late charge when people were trying to pay their electric bills. You know, and the idea there was that, you know, people might just forget, they might just miss it, or they might be having a tough month, so that one time we would forgive it. Well, the unfortunate news is that the new system doesn't make that easy to do. And I'm really disappointed about that, because I had high hopes, new system and all that. But as it says in that report, what Patty shared is that, it's like 4 hours or something like that of a village employee's time, two people's time, to try to figure out, is this their first late payment? Is it not their first late payment? At this point, it's difficult for me to weigh. I would like to hear from the community. I didn't have time to do outreach about this particular issue to community members to find out if this was meaningful, to have, this first late fee waived. I thought it was an important gesture of relationship building, if nothing else. So I wanted to hear what council thinks, because there's an economic burden of using people's time, but they're busy, but then that also costs money, versus going in this direction of waiving that first late payment. I want to bring a more bold proposal still about utility affordability. And we have to do that quickly. We have to get that information about the upcoming costs and when we'll accrue them as quickly as possible. And I think at a certain point, we just have to move forward to help our community. But in the short run, what do people think about this waiving the first late fee versus the burden to the employees? I really want to hear what you think.
Can I just make 2 quick points before council comments? The first is, remember that it is a combined bill. So when we forgive the late fee, it will be on all, not just on electric, and I want to be clear about that. So it is a combined bill, and we don't separate out the late fee on one part of it. So I know that we all are primarily concerned about electric because it seems to be at the forefront of everyone's conversation, but understand that this would be all utilities. And I'm not saying that it's good or bad, I just want you to understand that it is a combined bill. And the other thing is, we are continuing to work with the software company to see that if we can get the program to do what we want.
Do we know
But
what
that
the-
might
do we
would-
know what the median late fee is?
In 2017, just in January alone, there were 468 accounts that had a total of around $1,700. It was slightly more than $1,700. So I can give you an average of that here in just a second.
That was January 2017.
Yeah, and that's in the report.
I'm sorry, I didn't
It's
see it.
that comes out to an average of $3.63 per account.
A late fee of $3?
If you take the 468 accounts that were late and the total number, that's the average. Now, some people had less than that, some people had more than that, obviously.
Because it's
Yes.
5% of the.
Yeah.
It's 5% of the unpaid balance.
So that's spreading it across the whole.
That's correct.
Yeah, but so that's not the economic impact on the individual
That's
late
correct.
person.
Right.
This might require some digging in, and I don't know if this is where Judith was going in terms of asking about the median fee. I mean, do we have repeat offenders? And I don't mean that in a disrespectful manner.
We have people that are late on a regular basis.
Okay, so, and again, I thought this maybe where Judith was going. I mean, if you can't go in and, parse out the late fees, if you have folks that experience that on a regular basis, could you just give them a credit up front, and then let that late fee amount sort of eat that credit up?
The auditor would not like that. It would have to be a credit on an account at a particular time. You can't give it up front and say if you use it, you use it. Plus, we would have the problem of knowing if we already gave them a credit, and it would be the same. It would be the same thing. Did we already give you a credit? Are you on this list where you already got it, or do we need to do it because you haven't gotten it yet? I mean, what we talked about was, you can print a report of everyone who has a late fee for that particular month. And we are trying to find a way to export that and then sort it alphabetically. And so for January, then they would have to go in and let's just say that they have 468 people who have a late fee. They'd have to manually go into each account, credit the late fee, and then come out and go into the next account. So then for February, they would have to take the list they did for January, compare it to the list for February to determine which accounts, go in and credit the ones that didn't already have it. As the months go, it's going to get less, it's going to get a little bit less time consuming because the list of who already has a credit will get longer while the list of who didn't would hopefully get a bit shorter, but.
Well, I think in theory, I mean, obviously, this is a good thing, you know, making an effort to make an impact on people's lives. I guess my concern is, number one, in the lack of, with the lack of complete information in terms of what the software company can do. I think it's good that we say how important it is to us, but I don't think we can make a decision about what ought to be done until we get that information. And then we might have to weigh out the cost of, you know, some long-term impacts of spending more money on the accounting, on the billing system. So having said that, obviously, I'm in favor of us doing something, but I don't think I have enough information since we don't know what is going, if the software can be modified.
If, that will be sometime down the road. If we decide to do this, we will do it manually for a period of time. What that period of time is, I couldn't tell you.
I thought you were asking for a bid from the software company.
We have asked them to tell us if they think it's possible, and if so, how much it will cost.
Okay, and we were just waiting to hear that number.
Yes, but I don't know.
So what would they be doing? Creating like a database?
They
Is
would,
that-
they have to create a part of the program where if someone gets a late fee forgiveness,
Right.
where we can check that they have a late fee forgiveness, so that the next time we say, tell us who has a late fee that hasn't already gotten a forgiveness, it prints us out only the list
Right,
of.
but right now, we don't have our utility customers in some sort of database that's searchable or something like that, right?
Everyone is in the database, but it doesn't allow us to search for who has already been given forgiveness, if that's what you're asking.
That seems strange.
And that's what I said. I thought that would be something like we could, you've been given this credit, can we check this box? And,
Right.
but apparently, right now, it does not do that.
Okay.
So.
Yeah, I don't want to go down the rabbit hole. I mean, my IT brain is like, isn't there an empty field you can put a box in? And
Right.
Yeah, I mean, but, yeah.
That was kind of my question too, Lisa.
Okay. I set my timer, so I'll try not to talk too long. I'll try not to filibuster, as I've been accused of doing. But anyway, let's see. So, well, just a comment. I feel like our late fees are quite high, but some point, somebody can tell me why that is, but that seems, you know, it's a lot higher than my late fee for, you know, gas, for example. But anyway, but I guess my larger concern isn't about this particular thing or my larger comments, but just my concern that we had this top priority goal as affordability, and that it feels like we're not getting much done so far. And for example, the Energy Board, you know, well, we had this conversation about an education program to reduce utilities, and I'm concerned about how we're going to move forward with that. I'm concerned around timelines about how we're going to be able to move that, for example, forward. Because I think our staff is very stretched, and so we're waiting for information, and then there's this other issue of our, you know, the capital projects and sort of a capital improvements program, and how that cash flow is, so we kind of know where we are financially, which gives us, we need that information in order to move forward. So that's.
Are you talking about the Energy Board?
I'm talking about, yes, because we were going to do an RFP, and, you know, Patty was waiting for deliverables, and then when I started talking to folks, you know, and I know why Patty has a ton on her plate, But how are we going to move forward with that? Because if we're going to do an education program, we were going to do it in the fall, and so I started to think we needed to increase our capacity and that we should take that out of Patty's lap was a thought that came to my mind. But the other issue I want to bring up, which I brought up and I've been kind of waiting, is this separate question of what I call the landlord utility policy, which I have raised now several times of wanting to change that policy. If you read a lot of housing needs assessments, what they'll say is that the relationship between landlord and tenant is extremely important. If there's a lot of antagonism and instability in the relationship, that it makes tenants very susceptible to losing their housing. And I believe this policy has put the village in the position of actually causing that to happen. I mean, I'm a landlord. I get these notices on my tenants. I ignore them, but not every landlord would do that, you know. Because we've made the landlord ultimately responsible, I've always felt, and I told the council when I wasn't on it, and they made this policy, that I was against it. The village was losing, as I recall, but it would be good to kind of revisit how that decision was come to. I think it was losing maybe $10,000 a year, something. I mean, it was not nothing. But I don't want to see the village in the position of destabilizing these relationships, making landlords more anxious over, you know, the credit reports of their tenants, you know, the financial difficulties that their tenants are having, and therefore not renting to people who are more struggling type people, because they could end up getting stuck with this bill. And I've never thought it made it any sense anyway, because I never really bought the argument that somehow the landlord, you know, this is utility costs are somehow ultimately part of doing business or something like that. The other thing is the village, as a larger entity, is more able to bear some small losses in this regard. They're the provider of utilities. That's it's the business part of village government. There are certain risks to any business, and to me, that's a risk that the business takes on. It's a lot harder for particularly smaller landlords to take on that risk, so therefore, they're going to be a lot more careful about who they're renting with, too, because they can't take that risk, potentially. There's already risks when you're a landlord in terms of, if people get into financial distress and are not able to pay, their rents, and there's of course a lot of expenses when you have a rental properties. So anyway, I think we should look at that. It's time, as far as I'm concerned. I'm willing to bring something, but I think we should get a little bit of that background information. Sorry, talked too long.
I'd just like to respond to that I did bring that up I guess it must have been a couple of months ago now, and looked at the timing of when the landlords are actually notified and brought that report. So I think it's kind of a separate topic it's related but separate, and we should probably, I'll be glad to bring that back through from my earlier proposals.
It's related to this larger issue
Right, but
of affordability.
this was in an initial proposal, couple proposals back, so I'll bring that up again.
Go ahead.
Okay. Well, I think the goal that we have is to provide some relief to community members regarding utilities. I mean, that's the overarching goal. And we want to do it in a way that it has some meaning to community members, and in a way that is fairly doable for the village, both in terms of time and cost. So I don't have, well, here are the ideas that I have. It does seem that the Energy Board and maybe HRC both could be involved in thinking about this. In terms of that specific thing about forgiving the first late payment, I wondered if there could be something that the village says the village reserves the right to forgive the first late payment by request. And that people who are late actually just come to the village and say, hey, first time this year I've been late, I request that you not charge me this extra. that's just an idea that maybe that would be easier. And then the other thing I thought was to actually have some community members who, outside of any of our commissions, maybe create some kind of community group, maybe with some HRC, some energy board people, someone from utilities, some other group to look at what's gonna be meaningful to people. Like, if the late fee is 5% of a bill, for me, it would have been like $3 or $4. It's not gonna make that one time in a year. It's not really significant. It's gonna be significant for someone who has a several $100. It's gonna be significant for people who have really large bills. That's what would be significant.
So, I mean, I like your idea of us considering, doing the waiver upon request. I don't, and I don't think it's really that hard to, maybe not in the account, in the billing system to track who's gotten it or not, but, I could have just an Excel spreadsheet, Bill got one,
Right.
and now Bill's asking for another one, sorry, Bill. No offense to anybody named Bill. But I think to the point though, if it's by request, then we need to talk about, I'm not gonna ask for it if I have a $3 late fee. I'm gonna ask for it when it's a $200 late fee, and then we need to talk about what our pain point is gonna be. How much of a waiver are we willing to offer?
Well, I can answer part of that, because we did talk about a range, about if we were to forgive, if we were to forgive the, Chris, can you fix that? Well, if we were to forgive the first late fee, it would come out to somewhere between $6,000 and $10,000 a month. Now, that said, I think Mary Ann's
Wait,
idea.
say that again?
Or, I'm sorry, $6,000 and $10,000 a year. I apologize. I said a
Wait,
month.
cost to the village.
Cost to the
Oh.
village.
Gotcha.
I think that Mary Ann's idea for requesting it would make it much simpler, because then you're creating the list from the requests, and all you have to do is check the request against the list you've compiled. So that would make it a lot simpler to do, and it would also give the people the freedom to say, I want to do it this month knowing it's only going to be $3.50, or I want to wait because I may get one during the summer when I'm running my air conditioning. So I think those are good ideas.
So I also agree that request-based is good, but since Kevin brought up credit, I do want to mention something that I discovered that Columbus is doing. And they got a grant to do this, but they are crediting utility bills, and it's request-based, and it's largely based on, what level of poverty, what needs you have. But
Way to explain how it works?
so basically, you can, and it's a one-time thing, ask for, I think, a $250 credit on your bill, and do you remember, Lisa, what level of the poverty line? There's some.
No, but it's through this AMP. So
Yeah.
interesting that this was here. It's an AMP program.
Right. And so.
So a one-time credit of 250, up to 250, and it's
yeah,
based on income.
Exactly, and you requested. I've also kind of imagined, this idea of, request is one way to get around the people hours that would be involved. But, we could also think ambitiously about, if the funds allowed, and this is something that we have got to figure out immediately, is something across the board, and some people might make choices to not take that credit, or to use that to fund our utility roundup or something like that. So I do agree with Lisa's sentiment here, which is, I think we need to really look at something a little bit more impactful. And that's what I'd like to talk about at the next meeting. And because I don't think $3 or $10 or whatever is going to make a big difference. And so I think, again, if we look at what's going on with our funds and we're sure about that piece, and we think about, what can we afford, And then we also think about, I had not known that these grants were out there, so that's, yet another thing we can pursue. So anyway, but that's kind of my, like, overall, like, maybe let's get a little bit more ambitious. And then otherwise, I do want to just highlight, we have talked about the HRC and the Energy Board adding capacity to this project with the environmental savings education piece, and I don't see that happening. So maybe something's changing, but I at least know that, it was shared with me, the Energy Board doesn't feel that's their expertise. So it's unfortunate that we don't have a commission that's adding capacity to this project. But I think what ties to this is what Judith is saying is we need to look at, now that we're 6 months into the year almost, what are we going to get done this year? And where that capacity is going to come from. And so, ultimately, I've heard Patty say, okay, well, I'm going to carve out time to do it, which is not ideal, but we've got to figure out what are the projects that we're going to get done this year, or, right away.
And I will say that the RFP for the Energy Board is partially written, and it's on the agenda for the next meeting.
Oh, it is,
To bring us a draft at least.
I just thought you've got so much, now with you doing our
I
packets and everything else, I just don't see.
I
how
am
you're
a
gonna
bit
do-
swamped, but
Right,
it's.
which won't last forever.
Yeah,
But I
it's-
think that brings up a bigger issue, and we've talked about it a couple times, that part 2 of our retreat. And it seems to me that kind of, I don't know if I call it resetting, but at least reprioritizing where we're at, and thinking about, I know some work was started with Patty and before Melissa left about who would be responsible. What we never really got all the way to in closing the loop is how many hours these different priorities are going to take. So I think that's a piece of what we're talking about here. Utility roundup, this energy saving education program, these I think we want to get done this year. And so we need to figure out what that's going to take and who's going to really do that work.
And at some point, you need to start your conversation about the next village manager search and how you're gonna handle that as well,
Right.
so.
Can I ask?
Yes.
Kevin, is the HRC not interested in working on this?
Well, they're interested. They, I think during the periods when we were asking them to do a lot, just timing issue, we did provide some input to to the council on that. But there was a couple of meetings there where we unfortunately just barely had quorum a couple of times. So it's more than just capacity or willingness, but just availability. We've lost a couple of members, and we're about to lose another one here in the fall, so no need to mention any names. So there's a lot of churn going on there. So they're willing emotionally, just having the oomph. And again, Patty's really been a stalwart in being an encouragement for some of the things that she's done to help us move in the right direction.
Well, the thing is, at the last Energy Board meeting, we talked about an RFP to hire someone to coordinate, I'm not, it was unclear, this education program. And then, anyway, so, and then I'm wondering about the whole roundup, which seems to me like that could also be somewhat complex. And so it just struck me that we maybe need somebody helping with this stuff.
Well,
And that was the idea of the RFP, was hiring someone.
The utility roundup is progressing. I've had 2 more conference calls on that, and we have a meeting scheduled for next week, which I don't think Kevin has responded to yet, but.
Bad, Kevin. Sorry.
Oh, but I want to go back to this landlord utility policy. I'd like to hear from council. I mean, I told you what I think about it, and that it destabilizes relationships between tenants and landlords when tenants are in financial distress potentially. But, I mean, I would like for us to gather the information back from when the council made that decision, 3 or 4 years ago, to put that in place, and to remind us So how much money were, because what was happening, what was the practice then, as I understood it, was that staff was trying to help people to do payment plans, and, you know, there was a fair, but people were walking away from their bills, there was a loss to our, you know, to our
Right.
utility funds, but as I recall, it was something around 10,000, I could be wrong on that, but that's what I recall. But, so in lieu of all of that, there was this thing, as soon as a tenant is late on their bill, the landlord gets a notice.
No, that is not true, Judy.
Well, I'm getting a late notice.
Yeah, but you shouldn't be getting one until they're on the shut-off list.
Okay.
Okay. But I agree with Lisa. I think this is a different issue, and it should also be on the agenda so that other people can weigh in. And I think we should bring
we
it
do
back.
Okay, that's why I just wanted to get a,
Yeah, so maybe, and at the end, we can talk about how soon we want to bring it back. I do want to say one thing, though, and that is, you know, the distinction between a private business and, in our case, our utilities are funded by our taxpayers. And that was a big part of the decision that was made when when all council unanimously agreed to that. But I agree, I think it should come back, and I think we want the public to know so that we can hear others' thoughts. So Lisa, do you have a proposal about how we move this forward for our next meeting?
Well, I think that, for me, we have to make decisions based on our budget and the cost that we're going to have coming up. And, so, I mean, I feel a sense of disappointment of saying, okay, you bring an idea, I'll just keep bringing these ideas. But until we really know what a budget is, we can't make a bold recommendation. I'm pleased that we're going to talk about the Roundup program because I think it is moving forward. So really, I think what I'm asking for is just like this plea to get the cost analysis done as quickly as possible. It's a top priority to drive decision-making. And then I think we can make we'll know even what is a bold recommendation.
What cost analysis? are you
Well,
talking
this is that
Infrastructure.
Johnny was working on, it's like, what do we
So
have
the
to?
meeting that we're gonna have
Right.
with.
Well, there's an analysis that has to be completed before we can have that meeting.
Right, and Johnny and Brad and I are meeting once a week to work on that analysis so that it can be done by, we targeted the second half of July for that session.
So I guess it can't happen enough. We may recall that we formed early in the year a financial advisory committee to the village manager, but we cannot move forward in some of these things without that information. So I guess for now, I mean, we just need to table
I mean,
this
maybe that's
idea.
the top that is the top priority. is that
To me, that
analysis.
is the
Yeah.
top priority, but, that would be my recommendation. And as Kevin, and, I mean, I think everyone kind of agrees we need to be bold. Yeah, thanks.
Okay, thank you.
Bold. Bold.
Bold.
Well, I mean, what's bold? I mean,
Well, I mean, I need to know the numbers, right? I mean, from the beginning of my tenure, I've said, we have to do financial analysis to understand how much money that we have. Do we have the right amount of reserve in these accounts or not? At one point, I was fairly convinced that we had a fairly sizable amount of money
Right,
that we
right.
could give back to our community in some way or
that
another.
bold, I mean, if we find out that we really don't have, that we're either gonna have to choose not to do capital projects or repairs or.
Well, we're gonna be,
Then
yes.
maybe bold
sure.
isn't the best thing.
Right, but to me, bold and fiscal responsibility has to do with when are we actually going to need to spend this money? I mean, how quickly can we accomplish these projects, and what is the progression of the dollars and the funds? So to me, and I don't know exactly what bold is until we know how much is in those accounts, but I think when you combine it with our investment policies, and you think, okay, how much money do we really need to have in these accounts? That's a decision that the council needs to make. And we need to be fiscally responsible. But we maybe, in the spirit of affordability, need to cut the accounts a little bit more lean. But I don't know what that is, because I don't know what our upcoming expenses really are.
Well, I think a better word might be impactful, something that makes a difference. Still, we don't know what that number is, but if, for considering everything that's been said already, if it could end up being a $250 credit or waiver or something from a grant, I mean, that's impactful. It's not gonna solve the world's issues, but it's impactful, it'll make a difference, and I think that's reasonable. I think we can shoot for reasonable, and we can agree
Reasonable.
what reasonable
That
is.
seems-
Right.
For me, a bit.
Reasonably bold.
There we go, reasonably bold.
Well, I think we've got a good game plan, and so I think, Patty, what you're hearing, and it sounds like you've already heard it, is just that we're gonna keep on this and figure out what we're gonna do soon. Okay, so utility roundup, Patty, you've got an update for us?
I do. As I said, I've been doing some more research and talking to people who already have these programs in place. We've talked to the city of Napoleon, and I also, after I wrote this, spoke with the city of Oberlin, Sal Terririco, and they do their programs in a slightly different way. But I also spoke to Jackie Teagarden, who is the person with Northwestern Ohio Community Action who administers the programs on behalf of Napoleon and the city of Bryan. And she's sending me their procedures as well as the guidelines for each of the cities, because they're all a bit different. And what she's telling me is that we as a community, as you as the council, set the procedures or the conditions under which someone becomes eligible to be assisted by the utility roundup. Whether it's that it can only be if you're gonna be shut off, it can only be once every year or once every 6 years, or it can be up to a total amount, or whatever you decide you want those conditions to be. And then the nonprofit administers the program under those conditions. And so if someone wants to take advantage of the utility roundup, they would apply to the nonprofit. The nonprofit would take them through the procedure to make sure they meet the conditions. And then, depending on how we set up the funding part of it, the nonprofit would either send us the money, or they would tell us, and we would move it from the one line of the utility roundup fund into the accounts of these folks with the appropriate credit. I have not, because I only spoke to Sal on Friday, I have not had an opportunity to speak with Colleen about which way she would want to do that. We can either set it up the way the city of Napoleon does, where the money would go to the nonprofit and then come back to us, applied to those accounts, or we can keep the money in-house, but not make the decision as to who receives it, and that would be the part of the nonprofit.
And that's what Oberlin does?
That's what Oberlin does.
Okay. One thing, you said that you might want to have another citizen working on establishing guidelines. I would suggest that you ask Home Inc., if a staff person from Home
Well,
Inc., maybe Chris.
I think Lisa and Kevin were perhaps thinking of someone.
Well, the reason why
Kevin,
I
you had
suggest
somebody in
Home
mind.
Inc.
And
Yeah,
Mary
yeah,
Ann,
go ahead.
and with respect, I'm sorry, I don't think Home Inc. can, because I think some of Home Inc.'s people will take advantage of it.
I'm not suggesting that Home Inc. be the nonprofit. What I'm suggesting is that what Home Inc. does as part of their work is they review income and expense and debt and savings with people on a regular basis. That is part of what they do. So they have that expertise to be able to say, these are the kind of things that you might think about.
From an evaluation perspective, I mean, yeah, I think
Yeah,
they
to
could
set up the
provide,
guidelines.
right,
It
they
doesn't
can
have
provide a
anything to
great
do
deal of
with
information in terms of the
Home
guidelines for
Inc. people
evaluation.
apply or not. I mean, it wouldn't matter because it's not Home Inc. that would be administering.
So we can talk to them about their processes, but.
I mean, they
but
have
there
the
needs to-
expertise in that. They're probably the only place in Yellow Springs that does right now.
And I'm sure they'd be happy to share that information with us.
I think they would.
Indeed,
I would imagine they would.
good idea. So, yeah, I was a member of HRC that I'm thinking of.
And were they,
Tim.
but they would be involved in, as just like separate from HRC?
Right.
Is what you were saying?
Yes.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So that's one other, yeah. I mean, it's going to take some capacity to get this launched, in a kind of a burst of capacity. Do you know what I mean? To get it done,
To get it started.
to get it going
Get it
and
going.
get
Once
it.
it gets
So I mean,
going
I
and
think,
set up, and it'll
yeah, I
be an
think
ongoing.
a number of people.
Well, once we get the procedure and the policy done, we will be hands off of it. Because we can't be part of any of the decision-making as to who receives the benefit of the funds.
Mhm.
So,
Yep. Okay. All right, great. Diversity outreach, hiring policy. Patty, you're gonna start us off with that one?
Judith and Kevin, would you like to talk about it? Or, I mean, I just, Ruth Ann and I worked on the draft, but.
Well, why don't you start with what you and Ruth Ann did, and then Kevin and Judith can.
So we took the information that we had gathered over time from various conversations with council members and what we thought that we wanted to accomplish with the policy. We put that into a general statement and I'll be honest and say, I plagiarized a lot of this from another policy, but I think that it's probably very relevant to what we want. And so we put that into the general statement, and then below that, you see some of the steps that we've talked about at various times and with various people that we would like to see as part of our regular policy, that we take these steps every time we do a hiring process. You will see that we need to define what a minority is, because a minority is not necessarily only a person of color. There are other minorities that we should keep in mind. And I also put in there in red, and that was simply for council's information in the draft, that you have to remember when we say that we're going to repost it if no minority candidate is evident, that information, reporting that part is voluntary, and you do not have to report that in order to apply. And a lot of people don't do it. So I want you to be aware, and that is why I put repost once, because we could go and repost 15 times and not ever know that we have a qualified minority candidate if they don't self-report. So that's where we stood as of the end of it, just that brief one-pager, and then from there, I don't know if Kevin and Judith.
Could I make one final comment before you get?
Sure.
At the very last bullet point, it says, try to determine websites or locations for advertising positions that are more likely to reach minority populations. I suggest scratching try and to, and start with determine.
Okay.
Determine websites or locations.
Spoken with the wisdom of Yoda. Do or do not, there is no try.
Well, you gotta say it like Yoda,
Yeah, yeah.
if you're gonna say it.
What is the difference between try and do?
Well,
Well, because
I'll
the
be-
question
I'll-
becomes, how do
I'll
you
be
know
sure.
that you're reaching the minority
No.
populations?
I'm not gonna do whatever your son says you did.
So,
So,
you're not gonna do what I do.
I think this is a great start. And I think at the end of the day, after, Judith and I have been talking to each other and of course with Patty about this type of thing, and I think it's good that we do allow village staff to start, to do the foundation as opposed to us giving you something that we want, so that we at least give the impression that we're not trying to run.
Tell our village manager.
well said, Kevin.
Right. Just give the impression. So I think this is a good start. And yes, I absolutely want to continue to be involved with this. We've, there's lots of things that we can do in terms of best practice, and we've tried those things, we just haven't formalized those things. And I think we should continue to do that. As you all know, both Brian and I were involved with Colleen's selection. And so I won't comment on, how appropriate that may or may not have been, but I think it was good. I learned a lot, about the depth of wisdom that Brian brings to the process. And certainly, as candidates sat across the table from us, we, again, gave the impression that we are a diverse employer, and we should certainly keep doing that. And that's one of the things that from a best practice perspective, that's what you want to provide as a benefit to that candidate. And when I read this, I'm going to make sure I didn't read what first hit me, and then I had to read it again. Well, I think we should, in terms of having having a diverse hiring selection committee is important, regardless of how we define diversity. Antioch College spent a long time trying just to define diversity and its policies around diversity. So again, I think this is a good start. I'd like to see exactly how we're wording that request for self-identification. I think the ones that I've seen, they're presented in such a way that it disarms you, and you have to ask yourself, well, why wouldn't I identify? So I think we ought to make it something that we want folks to do. It's helpful information, et cetera, and it has no impact on whether you're selected. So I think we can maybe do some things to make sure we try to ensure that we get that information, because that's going to be a baseline for where we start moving forward, knowing who we've got applying to these positions. So, again, this is a good start. I'm willing to do whatever we can to keep moving forward and broaden it and apply some of those best practice things. Judith's been working on this longer than I have, so I will yield the rest of my 3 minutes to her.
The rest of your 3 minutes. Wait a minute, I'm starting all over now. Okay. You just took all your 3 minutes, fella. I should have been trying you. Okay. Well, just to say, I spent most of today looking, there is a lot of very interesting literature out there, and so I appreciate Patty, you and Ruth Ann's getting us started on this. There's a lot for us to learn about it, and I think we're going to need to take a little more time. And I had thought, and there was some confusion about, I thought that Kevin and I were responsible to start this off and write something and put it in the packet, and I was letting Patty know that, we weren't going to have it ready because I was away last week, and she and Ruth Ann were doing it, which I appreciated since I wasn't going to get it done. But anyway, just a couple of things that I thought would be good to get some input from council on. One thing I would say is that some of the language around, I think in terms of diversity hiring practices, I don't know that we want to use that kind of language. I mean, truly, people of color are the global majority, actually, and as the demographics are changing in our society, I think we just need to use slightly different language than that. That's one comment. In terms of how to reach, a diverse potential work employees, I was thinking we should be networking, and we already are, I think, to some extent, with our local groups that already, are advocating, for different groups, like the 365, Coretta Scott King, I was thinking the LGBT community, how do we use how do we network with, the strong institutions within the village to try to reach that more diverse potential workforce or candidates.
And maybe regionally, too.
And regionally, absolutely. Yeah, in fact, I thought of you and I was thinking about Dayton. Yes, I put Dayton region multicultural organizations potentially. So, as well as the college, the schools, the beloved community group, who also have some broader contacts, I believe. So I think the four of us should get together, Ruth Ann, Patty and Kevin and I and look at these things, these steps. And there's a very interesting, I mean, there's tons of studies, and, you know, I spent the whole day and I copied out some things here, like how the verbiage that you use in in your postings. It makes a big difference in
Right.
who applies. That's the kind of
Right.
thing that, you know, we all need to learn something from that. And there's studies been done, and we can learn from that information. But the other question, you know, that I had brought up, and it's really not about diversity hiring practices, it's about social justice hiring practices. It sort of came into my field of consciousness as I was thinking about this question, and was, you know, the issue of social justice hiring practices, which ACLU speaks to a lot, and so I've been kind of looking at that with JSTF and so on. It's just sort of been on the edges of what we're thinking of with the justice system, which is these issues around drug testing, and also, you know, what you call it, what am I trying to say here? So, you know, the whole question of drug testing, that's one question, at hiring and even throughout a person's employment. And then also, how we're using background checks in terms of considering people with histories of, you know, histories relevant to the criminal justice system, and that sort of thing. And ACLU has, I mean, they've got the whole recommendation of what they recommend, but I thought and I also, when I was thinking about this whole question, I think I brought, and I'm going to cut off here in a second, this whole question of really a strong work culture where we're encouraging people to move up through the ranks as much as possible. That's also, so just looking at our kind of hiring practices, so it's actually kind of broadening beyond diversity hiring practices. And so I was just going to suggest, I wanted to hear from council, do you want us to look at these issues around, you know, background checks and drug testing as a piece of thinking about our hiring practices or not? But I think the four of us need to get together before and kind of look at this further.
And we need some more answers from the insurance company and the legal on that,
That's true.
which we have asked for, because that unfortunately may be a moot point. But I would also like to discuss with you some of the things that we do already.
Yes.
That
Yes.
you're
So that
probably
we're
unaware
fully-
of.
Yeah, and sort of making that more conscious.
Yes.
And not to steal Patty's thunder, because I think she's going to introduce or talk about the implicit bias training, but
Yes,
when we
that's-
talk about cultural change, you know, that's a big part of that. So I think we've got sort of a multi-pronged approach happening here, so I think we are moving in the right direction.
Can I just suggest, when this work is done, I think this is a good opportunity to align our village value that talks about diversity, the HRC mission statement that talks about, you know, the discrimination that we fight against, and also just the language within this. Like I noticed, for example, mental was not mentioned, it was just physical abilities. So different groups have done different work on that, but I think we want
Trying to-
the best
to have it
statements
aligning
of
together.
that, right?
Yeah.
And maybe that's in the current village values, but anyway, just to flag that.
And so while we're on the topic of the work to be done, can I just make a mention to everyone to please remember that for the next few weeks, I'm kind of doing double duty. So if I say I can't meet to work on a
Well,
particular item.
maybe we can work together and then get.
Well, and I'm happy to try to get that in, but I do have to
Yes,
do
I know.
things like minutes and that now. So it'll only be for a couple of weeks, and I realize we have to move forward, but please understand if I ask you to delay momentarily.
And you are doing a great job, by the way.
I don't know about that, but I appreciate that, and I am trying. So, you should have seen us high-fiving when we finally got the packet to behind the other day. We were dancing.
Nice.
But anyway, so.
All right, excellent.
Who was helping you with it?
Dorothy
Dorothy
Smith,
Yeah.
who's,
Oh,
who's
okay.
kind of helping with answering emails and making copies and stapling packets.
There you go.
Okay, so with that, let's move into Tree City USA.
And I can certainly discuss this, but I thought that the members of the tree committee were gonna be here for that. As you can see, during a previous meeting, we discussed becoming a tree city. We have to meet 4 standards to become a tree city. We have to have a tree board or department. We could, the current tree committee is not an official village committee. It is a group of private citizens that works in conjunction with the village. We could make them an official committee. The second involves enacting a tree care ordinance, which we can also do. It would not be that difficult, although it would take me the time to get one from other places and make it what we want it to be, go through a few drafts. The third standard is to establish a per capita budget for tree care. We would already meet this even with just the trimming that we do for our electric lines every year. So it would not actually be any additional costs that council did not choose to spend. And then the final standard is to have an annual Arbor Day celebration, which can be pretty much what we want it to be. I've seen a lot of different versions of it over the years. Ohio does have more tree cities than any other state, if we choose to do this. When we spoke about this before, the tree committee was here, and council indicated, or they indicated to council that they were not in favor of this. That has since been reversed. They have sent a letter to council
Well, apparently it was one person
saying,
Person what?
that was not interested in this. Maybe not speaking for the rest of the tree committee.
but at the end of the day, if we want to do this, we do need to apply by December to be a 2019 tree city. I think that's doable, but there is some work involved in the ordinance part of it.
So I'm going to say 2 things. One is, I am not sure I want to make any kind of decision about this until the tree committee is here. Because one thing I'm understanding that made them come back to us is that they are a group that's becoming older and doesn't have capacity. So when we looked at this the last time, I remember, Mary Ann, you were like, whatever, who cares about Tree City USA? But what I've always thought about is that it's an opportunity, it's not just the accolade, but it's an opportunity to think about, proper care of our trees and also where they go. And this ordinance, for example, could be a great opportunity for thinking about our streets moving forward. We can't do anything on West South College until those trees die, and then we can fix that sidewalk or something, for example. And we've been told that they're on their last cycle, so that's going to happen soon. So, we might want to think about things like, how do we make sure we're a little bit more careful about where trees are planted in the future, so that we can, have all the kinds of infrastructure we want.
Right, and I agree that that would be a very important part of it.
Right.
And
But then this capacity thing, I'm not sure we've totally wrapped our heads around what this is going to mean for the village team.
yeah.
So,
And keep in mind that even as it stands right now, after year 3, the village takes over the care of any tree that's planted by the tree committee on public property. So for the first 3 years, they water it, but after that, it's ours. And we trim it, we cut it down if necessary, we do all those things. So as it stands now, that is our responsibility. And I appreciate you thinking about the capacity, Brian, because
Right.
that is, one of the reasons that we were able to move forward with the glass farm is because the village committed to not having that be something that staff needed to take care of in forming a committee, board, whatever, to do that, so. And the other thing that this would entail is an annual report to the Arbor Day Foundation, which would be done by the staff, so.
Well, I guess I have mixed feelings about it. I like trees. I don't want to take on something unless, 1, we know what we're taking on, and 2, understand that we can generate the capacity to do that through volunteers. I question whether cutting tree limbs for our electric lines is tree care. I mean, yeah, I guess we can say we are budgeting it, but to me, it's not tree care.
I only say it that way because it is an acceptable budgetary item.
But I'm also thinking if maybe like the school forest people or the high school would have interest in having, if there'd be interest in having high school students get involved in something like this, then I could see that the increased capacity and create more of an educational program for young people too. But I think we do need to have the tree committee.
Yeah, because I want to hear exactly what their expectations are, not just secondhand,
So,
in passing. And then an evaluation of what this would mean that the village is taking on, or at least what kind of commitment we're talking about, and then how we would get volunteers. Okay,
so you would like me to have the tree committee to be at the next meeting?
maybe not the next meeting. Let's talk about that at agenda planning.
Okay, and
But Also
then,
not just be, I think,
Right.
I'd like to see something written from them about what they would commit to. You know, and really what they can commit to, what they can bring to the table.
Yeah. Cool.
Patty, a minor question. You say that Ohio has more tree cities than any other state, and you list a few. This is not an exhaustive list of
no,
cities.
you can go to the Arbor Day Foundation and look at the exhaustive list. These are just the ones in our
Okay.
general area. I think
Okay.
Oakwood is the most recent tree
Okay.
city, actually. They have an annual banquet in April, and they acknowledge the new ones. They acknowledge every 5-10 years you get a flag and a thing to go on a sign that says you're a tree city for X number of years. They have an award for if you increase your tree program. So it's usually a very nice event,
Right.
so.
Okay. All right, Housing Advisory Board
Yeah.
update?
So in your packet, there is a recommended process from the Housing Advisory Board. For this meeting, it is read only, but I want to give you some information about it. First of all, it's a 7-step process, and while it's listed consecutively, really almost each step might be happening simultaneously or coming back to it. So the first step is gathering information and identifying issues. The second step is assessing resources. And the third step is develop a vision and policy statement. And under that third step is on the second page, at the top of the page, is a draft of a potential statement. Then there's setting goals, developing strategies to meet the goals, developing a housing initiative plan, a written plan, and implementing the strategies. So at our next meeting, and actually, we have one more meeting in June, 2 meetings in July, and then we skip the first meeting in August traditionally, so we only have 1 meeting in August. So that would be 4 more meetings. And during those next 4 meetings, at the next meeting, the July 18th meeting, I would like council to grapple with this process, discuss it, have input, yay or nay or whatever. And I'd also like us, council, at the next meeting, to read the, what's called the vision policy statement and have input into that so we can get that agreed upon relatively quickly. And then, and hopefully that's not going to take so much time, but setting goals or targets is a really critical and not something to be taken lightly. Patrick Bowen from Bowen, whatever they're called, analysis group, the people that did the housing needs assessment, had indicated he would come one more time and meet with council pro bono. So I have asked him if he would come and help council think about targets, ask questions like, how did you get, he gave us a sheet that said, if we keep going in this direction, this is the number of housing units of these types that we could build in the next 5 years, and there'd be a market for them, and we could absorb them. Now, we don't necessarily want to go just that direction, so we want to think about, well, how can we shift things so we can go the way we want to go? Well, we have to figure out where we want to go. At any rate, he seems to be a good person to help council with that, and he is scheduled to come on the August 20th meeting. So we have 3 meetings before that meeting.
Bowen is.
Patrick Bowen.
And you mentioned somebody else that might come too?
Then we talked a couple months ago with, about 4 people who help communities develop mixed income housing.
Mhm.
And one of those people is a guy named Josh Abrams, who's on the West Coast. And I talked to him today. He said he would be willing to come and for one day, pro bono, one day, if we would pay his expenses to come here, because he likes Yellow Springs, he likes Antioch College, and he has a family in Cincinnati. But I see that as being, we haven't gotten there yet. We need to think more about what we would have him do, if we would have him come at all.
Mhm.
We had also agreed at the Housing Advisory Board that you and Denise were going to report on the gentrification workshop you're going to.
Yeah, so Thursday, Denise and I are going to a workshop in Columbus, sponsored by the Ohio Community Development Corporation, on how to deal with gentrification. So we're doing that on Thursday, and we will report back to the Housing Advisory Board at our next meeting, which will be before the next council meeting, I'm pretty sure. So,
Great.
And I,
One thing, we're going to have 2 meetings. So the next council meeting, you guys are going to report on the gentrification, you bring us information.
to the Housing Advisory.
And then to-
And they
and
can
then to
report to
council.
council, yeah.
Yeah, okay. And then there's 2 meetings in July, correct?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I've been thinking that for Patrick Bowen to be able to be helpful to us, I mean, it's not kind of a technical question, how many, houses at this level, income level, that income level. It's not really a technical question, it's very much, and so I'm feeling like I'm not quite sure how, but I feel like, I mean, we were gonna give him input about, the little meetings that we had, but,
We've given him, you mean?
I'm just wondering if council was going to want to have a conversation together in terms of giving him some information that he has before he comes.
Sure.
Before he comes.
Well, can we, I mean, there was a summary of information from all those meetings. Can we just not, can we share?
That has been shared with him already, has it not? But I don't think, I mean, I think we have not, as a council, had a conversation with our community, and I'm thinking, for him to be able to help us, it would be useful if I'm not quite sure how we focus that, but in July, that's something I think we should maybe think about. is-
Yeah, so we'll have 3 meetings before that meeting, so, and I'm anticipating that at every council meeting, we'll be talking about housing, the housing process, including the goals and targets and what that would mean, so, yeah, I would think we would be talking about that, and then be prepared to, and we can communicate with him too outside of council.
Can we?
Yeah.
Sure. Did you have something, Lisa?
Well, just kind of a clarifying question. So when I think about, I'm kind of putting things along like a little timeline, like that step 4 will really begin in earnest like in the fall, early September? Is that, am I kind of getting that right? That the
Setting the goals.
in earnest goal-setting conversation? Does that seem about right?
Yeah.
Well, I was hoping even before
Or even,
then.
so like kind of, it was like kind of,
I mean, I was hoping that we could start talking about that in July, so that when Patrick
I see.
Bowen comes in August, that we have an educated conversation with him about, this is what we've identified as what we want. How do you suggest, does this seem reasonable?
yeah. So
And
it's
if
still.
we're not at that place, then we should probably delay having him come.
Well, I can kind of see it's kind of your point about it's cutting through and, not just have the conversation, but we're talking about it kind of again and again and giving us a chance to gain input from the community and think about it ourselves. So I mean, that makes sense. For me, I still am looking for those definitions of different levels of affordability.
We should be getting that,
We-
right, from Kevin.
That would be
Kevin-
super
Kevin
helpful.
Magruder is.
Is working on that. And so I think this
He
is.
sounded like he was going to get that for us
I
by
think
next
this is
week.
such a good document, and it really tells a full story, and I really appreciate the work that's gone into it. So I want to thank you and the other people that are working on it, because it's a big decision, and, I mean, I guess the one thing I'm a little bit different than you said, Judith, is to me, there is a technical component particularly because we're only talking about X amount of buildable space between Glass Farm and backfill. So to me, the decision about goals has to
It's very,
fit.
it really is ideological, technical, and technical, both.
Yeah, you have to fit those things together.
And conflicting, not conflicting, but, I mean, for example, we do not want to have 1,000 housing units in the next 5 years. We don't have the capacity, but that gets into, well, would we become a city? I mean, so we have to look at things from different viewpoints, and so it really is like, where do we want to, who do we want to be able to have live here with some degree of ease? I won't use the word affordability. And how can we do that? How do we balance the different things? we
These
do?
like systemic
And
tensions,
of
right?
course, we don't have control over most of this. We have fair amount of control over land that the village owns. We can influence what happens in other spaces, but it's intention.
And I do think the draft vision and policy statement is already quite good, so, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, yes. Huh?
We can.
All right, good. Yeah, I almost had nothing to comment, believe it or not. Okay. I know. You wouldn't believe it. Okay, a couple quick things, and then we'll move into new business. So, our infrastructure discussion, we are supposed to pick a date. So everybody was supposed to come with possible dates in the second half of July.
And
This
it's
is
going
gonna
to be
be a
evening.
4-hour, we expect a 4-hour meeting.
Well,
Evening, right?
I mean, that's what we're planning for, but I guess I do want to, well, okay, as people are opening up their calendars. Patty, I would like this, though, to be different from the 4-hour meeting that Mary Ann and I had, in terms of, being a little bit more focused in the context of goals. And I think there should be some kind of pre-work or something. I mean, I don't want us to all come into this cold, so that it's more focused.
Okay, so what, you would like to see the presentation ahead of time as opposed to just, at least in a
That'd be-
draft form?
Sure, that'd be good, so we can bring
Because-
questions.
Because what we're trying to do is, we're trying to take the things that we know in each section, like for water, wastewater, streets, sidewalks, stormwater, electric, and we're trying to group them and then prioritize them within their category and get approximate prices on the things that we think will happen in the next 3 years. And then we are going to take and make an overall priority list of all of them combined, if
Okay.
that makes sense.
All right. Yeah, that sounds pretty good, and then just making sure that we're thinking about goals in the mix as well.
Is that going to be adequate to, we were going to do that, is this where that review, that 6-month review of the,
We'll pull that into a meeting, is what I'm gonna
Into a
propose.
council meeting,
Yeah, I think
okay.
that's better.
Yeah, I do too.
So I am seeing, by the way, that July does have a 5th Monday, which is the 30th. So I don't know if we want to try to do something like that, but,
If we do that, if everyone could start slightly earlier, I mean, I think that if we try to start at 7, we're all gonna be pretty fried. I would
Like
suggest
5?
something 4:30 or 5, something a bit earlier, gives you a chance to go get something to eat real quick and,
Well,
Or maybe have pizza or something.
yeah.
okay.
Does that work, July 30th at 5?
Yes. It works now because I haven't planned anything for my wife's birthday.
Dr. Kathy Roma is going to be very angry at me for missing another World House Choir rehearsal, but yes. And I, and I,
Actually, the 28th.
Oh,
I think that Mary Ann made a really important comment at the last meeting when this came up about this being at a time when the community could attend if they're interested.
Right,
So I think that argues for it being in the evening, you know, on a time when people are maybe used to us meeting.
right. And, you know, maybe we target a 3-hour discussion. I mean, I think we've got the work ahead of time, and we have our questions, but we won't rush it. So,
Okay, so July 30th, beginning at 5 PM,
Yes.
and
And
hopefully
is-
ending between 8 and 8:30.
I guess my question is staff just, I mean, we're looking at infrastructure need, but is that on a calendar? Is there some notion of, you know, a year's calendar of, that is? Okay.
We're trying to prioritize what we think needs to happen within the next 3 years at least. Potentially farther into the future, but at least 3 years, and giving you ballpark numbers on what those particular items would cost.
So it's what, when, and how much?
Yes, to the best of our ability.
Sure.
That said, if something needs engineering, you know, we're guessing. Now, we all pretty much know what we're talking about, but we're still guessing,
Okay,
so.
good. Okay, and then Judith, you wanted to clarify something
Yeah,
about Mayor's Court?
you know, we had that recommendation number 1 from the mayor's, about the mayor's court at our last council meeting. And I talked with Lisa, and I rewrote this up a little bit, Lisa, because we wanted to give some direction to the Justice System Task Force. There was a little bit of unclear, a couple of people I've talked to were like, you know, a little confused, you know, what is council really wanting? So I just wanted to, this is what Lisa and I thought we would say to JSTF, that the next step is to communicate with Chief Carlson and Mayor Conine, I've written this down, and seek more specific information on their views regarding what types of charges should not be sent to Mayor's Court or should be assigned to either Mayor's Court or Xenia Municipal Court based on the officer's discretion, and why. That we would try to get, that we would ask to get very much more specific on that. And then after that, the JSTF could review the information and send council a new recommendation regarding if or what citations JSTF would recommend be sent to Mayor's Court by village council policy.
Okay, I think that sounds good. And then, if you want to give 2 examples, there were 2 things I raised that
Okay,
I thought
yep.
seemed to be most compelling. One was this potential cost of incarceration. And secondly, these county services that were referenced that people could not access from Mayor's Court. So those to me were 2 things that I'd like to really
Potential
understand.
cost of, sorry, say it again.
So it'd be cases that could cost the village for incarceration,
Okay, yeah.
and then cases that could not get essential county services, I guess.
So then we would end up, this is the question, of a list of, these are the cases that automatically will be sent to Mayor's Court, which we
Well-
assume would be the largest list. And then these, the smaller list, these are the types of cases that might be sent to Xenia for the following reasons.
Yeah, I mean, I think I don't know what JSDF is going to decide, but just to say that, after, we received the chief and Pam's letter in the packet, clearly, we need to communicate more with them and get more detail. And that's, but there was I think some people were feeling like, they brought a record. I felt like they wanted to hear from council. What does council want? There was some sense of, we gave you a recommendation, put a lot of work into it. And we thought we had the information that we needed from chief and the mayor, but obviously we did not. And so I wanted to be able to give them very specific, from the council, what's the next step to re-looking at this.
I mean, to me, if it were me, I guess I'd want to say to the chief and to the mayor, we would like to know, and I don't know what, I guess the chief and the mayor, council wants to know, what are the cases that you believe automatically should go to mayor's court? What are the types of cases that you think officers should have discretion, and why should they have the discretion?
Right.
What are the reasons?
Right.
And I think that should come from the police and the mayor's court, and I don't know, maybe go to your committee, and then the committee
Well,
negotiate or whatever with the chief or something, and then come back.
And I think they've largely identified those, I mean, in the documents we had. So, I mean, maybe there's some things they didn't put in writing, but,
Oh, you mean the chief and?
yeah, I think they have.
Well, no, it wasn't that clear, actually.
But it'd be
I don't
good
think.
to
But anyway,
completely nail it down.
okay.
Awesome. Okay,
That sounds okay with you guys? Yeah.
great. All right, new business. So I will lead this off. This is talking about potentially looking at our financial investment strategy a little bit differently. This is one of the things that when Lisa's talked about in this case, this is the manager's finance advisory committee, a little bit different from another finance committee that you and Rachel and Melissa are now Colleen. Rachel, thanks for getting the information together that you had that was in the packet. I will say, first of all, that, in our discussion, one of the things we thought was important to look at was better return on our investments. And this is something I know when I started council 4+ years ago, I was amazed that we had millions in our funds, but we were getting very little return. Now, I've learned a lot about that, right? There are limits to what municipalities can do. Rachel got that message and has looked for ways that we can be, think a little bit more creatively within that realm. And so Star Ohio, Star Plus, those are biggies. I think we're all familiar with that. We've started to get into the commercial paper realm. And I think really what we're looking at tonight is we've been working with Huntington, and they are basically the fee that they charge is tied into the instrument that they purchase. So one way that that these, I guess you can pay an investment consultant is they sort of wrap the fee into what they buy. Or you pay a yearly commission basically to engage somebody to be a financial advisor. We got a presentation that was in the packet from Bondtech. They work with about 14 municipalities in our region, and they're relatively small in focus. The other one that had presented prior, that Rachel got a presentation from, is Meter. And my understanding is the municipalities, they do a good job. And so I think these are two financial consultants that have that expertise around what municipalities can do in terms of their investing. I think that's really important. But at the end of the day, I guess what I'm weighing is, will a little bit more cost potentially mean a substantial amount in a return on that investment. And we've seen some different numbers in the presentation. Brad's number said that he thought we could get to the point where we were getting 150,000 a year on our investments.
Now, which one was that one?
That is Bondtech. I think Meter was a bit more conservative. They targeted something like 85, if I recall.
Is that if we put in 5 million?
Yes. And so that is going to be one piece of this, which we also need to drill down on, which is what do we actually have to have in our US bank accounts? And one of the things that, Rachel has encouraged for a while now is shifting some of that balance out of those checking accounts, which don't make us anything, right? And in fact, can cost us a little bit when you look at sort of the balance between the fees they charge versus the credit that we get. We've mitigated that significantly with Rachel's help, but that is another issue. And that is something that, similar to the other cost analysis we talked about earlier, we want to know very soon, now that Colleen's on board, what we need in that checking account. And keeping in mind that, are both the STAR accounts, Rachel, liquid or just?
We only have one right now.
just-
We've had Star Plus in the past,
And why don't you go ahead and come up, because I was going to shift to you anyway. But, but both of those accounts are relatively fluid in terms, liquid?
They
Yeah,
are.
okay. So, so why don't you fill in some blanks? I kind of wanted to just give an overview, but, you know a lot about this.
Well, it's good. I've been, doing it for a while, and just so you all know, that part of the first question is, how much do we have to invest? And that's not an easy question to answer. You just talked about infrastructure projects coming up. How much are you gonna plan to spend on those? How much you gonna need to set aside for those projects? How much income are you gonna have from taxes? Those are not easy questions to answer. And my challenge has been working with the finance director to get answers to those questions. Because we can, certainly, the money that we've had sitting here could have worked harder. There's no doubt about it. But I can only invest what people feel comfortable investing. So if they feel like, we've got this water plant coming up, there's always these projects, you don't know quite how much your tax revenues are gonna be, how the recession hit people income-wise, all kinds of sort of things that are a little bit nebulous to try to measure. And so finance directors, being financial people, they tend to err on the side of conservative, and they want to make sure that that money's there, if they need to tap into it right now. That being said, I think that as the person in charge of doing the investments, I would have liked a little more to be investing, so that I could come to you and say, look at all the money we made. And, and so that's been my frustration. But, I'm not the person who can say, this is how much we can invest. I don't feel like that's my job, and I would not presume to tell council or staff how much they should set aside for investment. But I can, show you the reports, which I do on a quarterly basis, and you can see what we have sitting there. One of the explanations that I was given when I kind of pushed on this was, well, we have a lot of different funds, and fund accounting is a little more tricky than just this summary that I'm showing you every quarter. We have, a lot of that money might be sitting in XYZ fund, and we know we're gonna have to do some infrastructure work in that fund, so we don't really want you tying that up. So really, before we can even really begin to compare investment advisors and who we should hire and who we like and all that stuff, we really need to be able to tell them, anybody that you want in charge of this, how much can you invest and for how long? Now, there are limitations because we are a governmental entity and we are limited. We can't invest the stock market, you know, it's all very limited and, but we can, you know, invest in longer terms, things that we've invested. Now, in the past, and you have to understand, in the last 10 years, we've had a tremendously low interest income environment. The kinds of things that we've been permitted to invest in just have not been making a whole lot of money. You know, the interest rates have just been very, very low. But that being said, we could have made more had we invested more. But, you know, through the years, I've been able to, you know, slowly kind of convince people, yeah, you know, I think maybe we can move this stuff, certainly to Star or Star Plus. And it's very, you know, and that's something that's run by the treasurer of the state of Ohio. And it's very liquid. You can get it in a matter of a few days. So certainly, you know, if we knew a few days, you know, a week ahead of time, we could get access to that money. So those are that's the real issue, is trying to define what could we invest for how long. We did not invest very long-term when I set this up with Huntington at the end of 2016, because I really pushed in 2016. Finally, you know, felt like Melissa had been here long enough, she felt comfortable enough to say, okay, we can move some money now. And so we did, you know, that's when we pushed. She didn't feel comfortable enough to invest $5 million, which would have been pretty much the threshold for using meter. So what did that make us? Well, you know, I go to these conferences every year, I talk to people present. Huntington's a big, you know, well-known bank in Columbus and among governmental entities, felt pretty comfortable, had presentations at these conferences that we go to. So, they, you know, and for what we needed, I felt like they were the best choice that we had. I didn't choose US Bank, and I could have, but my feeling, I was a little biased against them, I'll be honest, and it's strictly just from a diversification standpoint. We have all of our checking with them, we're using them for a lot of services. Let's not put all of our stuff with them. And really that was, you know, and so I decided sort of consciously, let's spread it out and use somebody else. And I like Ted Sumner, and he came and talked to us several times, and he could certainly purchase the kinds of things that we were permitted to purchase. So we got some CDs, we got, you know, some commercial paper, gave us a little better return than what we could get at Star Ohio or Star Plus. And so you can see that we've gradually, you know, last year we made $36,000, which isn't a huge amount of money, but compared to what we made in previous years. 2017, we made $36,000. 2016, we made $7,000. So that was a big jump. So obviously that move to Huntington helped. And also because the recovery has helped. So I'm happy to work with you all in trying to push this. I would love to have more money to invest. I'd love to see our money work harder than it is. So I think that if the question, it really is, what is the forecast and how can, you know, how much money do you think we can tie up for 3 years? Finally, the last thing I'll say is, until very recently, the last year or so, not even, the interest rate that you could earn for longer term bond, you know, fixed securities has not been, normally the longer you invest for, the higher your return. And that's the, so you have this curve that goes like this. For a while there, over the last several years, it actually was like this. The longer term you invested, the less return you got. So it didn't really behoove us, frankly. We weren't missing out on a whole lot for a lot of those years. because we weren't investing long-term. Long-term wasn't paying much at all. So you had this what they call an inverse yield curve. So just wanted to point that out.
Right.
But now we're starting to see that turn around. And now we're starting to see things act more normal as far as fixed security bond market type stuff. So it's a good time to have this conversation. I don't feel like we missed the boat because honestly, there hasn't been much of a, it's been a little boat. You know, so
Right.
just-
All right.
all right.
Thanks, Rachel.
Thank you.
Okay, so what comments or questions?
Well, it seems to me we need to, how do we decide how much we want to invest?
Well,
Right.
I have had some brief conversations with Colleen on this topic, and with the caveat that today was her first day full-time, okay? She's been here half-time for, I think, 3 weeks, and now she's full-time as of today. I think that she is more comfortable than Melissa was with using the Star Ohio and Star Plus accounts as far as being able to move more money into those and make them part of the liquid investment and moving those back and forth. She hasn't given me a definite amount yet, but she seems far more comfortable with that kind of an option in investing than Melissa tended to be. And maybe that's because she has more experience as a finance director, or maybe she just sees things differently.
Can I just say, and as uncomfortable as Melissa was,
Mhm.
Marilyn was even more uncomfortable. So we actually improved, you know, as far as, I mean, it's the truth. I mean, Marilyn just did know, I mean, it was poor people, you know.
Prior
Yeah.
finance. Lisa?
Well, to me, the conversation's somewhat related to our earlier conversation about how much reserves have to be in these different accounts. Because, I mean, I was always trained that money that isn't moving isn't working. And so if there's a comfortable amount of liquidity in the investments, then, and if we know when we're gonna need the money, and it's low risk, we might as well be letting the money work. So I think these conversations are tied up with the earlier one that we said about how much reserves do we need in these different types of accounts.
Right. And ultimately, I think we have been too risk averse, all right? Especially knowing that the Star Ohio and Plus accounts allow for that liquidity if we got into a bind. So, all right, so it sounds like I'm seeing or it looks like I'm seeing
Is there a
nods.
risk?
Yeah.
Is there actually,
Yeah,
what is
it
the
a
risk?
or it's
You say
more
we're too
about
risky.
tying it up, isn't it?
Yeah, it's more about tying it up. So we can make
Not
this.
losing, not
No,
losing.
I
No.
don't mean that, but that is I mean, yeah.
Sure, I mean, but the kind of investments that we can get into are very low risk. I mean, I think it's more about the tying up of money and making sure that we don't, the liquidity.
Yeah.
But I think that if this sounds like something that we all want to move forward with, that the next step is we're gonna drill down on the checking account piece. And then I think we also need to make a decision on, and this could come back when we've got that detail about the route that we want to go. But what was explained to Lisa and I was that paying the sort of fixed yearly fee ends up being about the same as what they take on the, commercial paper that they buy and everything. So, we honestly felt a little bit better about somebody that's just gonna be in it to do the best that they can for us, and, so. All right, anything to add?
Nope.
Lisa?
No, I'm glad we're moving forward with the conversation.
Yes.
Thank you, and thank you, Rachel.
All right, thanks, Rachel. And we also have a treasurer who wants to work really hard for us too, so thank you. Okay, other quick thing was, I actually said PC, but I meant BZA, Board of Zoning Appeals. I and Denise interviewed Dan Reyes, who's been one of our alternates, and he would like to renew. He's got a great background, architecture, knows the village really well. So I would like to nominate Dan to have another term as alternate of BZA.
Second that.
Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right, Patty.
I'm just going to highlight a couple of things. The implicit bias training that Kevin mentioned earlier, we've set those dates and times. Now, with the caveat that today, someone asked because August is the time where everybody wants to take their vacations, and in fact, that is part of the time that Judy will be gone. So the question was asked, could we not make a session 1 and a session 2 on one day and a session 1 and a session 2 on the other day? I've sent Tiffany an email asking her that. The reason that we separated them was because there's for lack of a better word, homework. There's some action that she would like everyone to take between the sessions.
Good.
So I don't know that we can or can't make them to be on the same day for that reason, but I will keep you posted. Those were the 2 days we settled on when we spoke to her about her schedule and what would work for us. So it may change as far as whether you have to be at both days or simply at one day twice, but I will keep you posted.
I'm just going to give my plug for, given my, I think, pretty significant background in training. It's not about just getting it done
Right.
as soon as possible.
Right.
You need some time, so,
Right, and so but I did ask the question because it was asked of me, and
Right.
I'm sure that the answer is going to be that's not the optimum way to do it, but I did ask that question.
okay.
Let's see, the new backup generator is in and installed, 2 staff-related things. As you can see in my report, water and wastewater plant operator Richard Stockton is leaving the village. He's accepted an assistant supervisor position with the city of Springfield, so apparently we've trained him well, and he is gonna be moving up, so we will be advertising for that position to get a new operator. And also, I did not put this in my report, but I would like to mention that Ruth Ann has graduated and received her associate's degree in human resources. So congratulations to Ruth Ann for that. I think that that's pretty much it, other than you see that I will not be requiring my salaried staff to be at council meetings, except perhaps on a quarterly basis to give you reports.
Okay.
Oh, and I need to do the chief's report. So of course, we have street fair on Saturday, which Brian mentioned. Also, there will be a lane closure for that on Dayton Yellow Springs Road at 675, and a portion of 235 is already closed for repairs. So please be aware that traffic may be even a bit slower than normal, and plan around that. And don't forget to go get your popsicle.
Was the chief's report going to include any data regularly? I
For
thought,
meeting, well, I don't know if that's.
so that's, we're still-
Oh, yeah, it was, and I don't know why he didn't put that in there, Lisa, that's a good point, I will ask him that.
Or is that the second meeting,
is
though?
that the second meeting
Is it
maybe?
at this, I think it is at the second meeting,
Okay.
now that we.
Maybe that's when we get
Yeah,
all
they need
that.
to
All right,
be
'cause-
compiled for this.
Yeah, from the previous month, yeah.
Right.
Okay.
Anything else for Patty or Chief?
Well, and you'll see Colleen's report in there as well,
Yes.
so.
That was great. And Chris?
Well, nothing formal in the packet. As we could see in future business, we'll have the ordinances next meeting for first reading for the small cell.
Okay, great. Okay, so future agenda items. So I already have written down that we want a significant chunk of time to talk about the housing process. And are there any things on June 18th that people don't think we'll be ready to talk about?
The resolution for the electric pole replacement, I've sent the draft to Johnny, but I don't know that he's reviewed yet, so.
Okay, but that's not until,
That's on the 18th,
right?
that it's
And-
just a resolution.
Go ahead.
Will you be ready with the RFP for the energy?
The draft should be ready, yes.
Okay.
I had a question about sort of our process for agenda. I know we do agenda planning, we talk about these things, but the question of a Justice System Commission, it evidently was in the paper, and it's not something we're really, I mean, I was going to try to push to have something ready in July, but it's actually kind of pushing. So was there a reason why?
You mean it was in
You
the
guys-
paper as a future agenda
It
item?
was on the, it was evidently in the paper that it was going to be on, I don't know, the last council
Well, you
meeting
were
or something
gone, I
that.
think.
Yeah, and I did not request it to be put on, so there was, so I was wondering, how are things like that?
So
getting put on?
actually,
I
when-
didn't know,
I got your message about that, and,
yeah.
at least 2 months ago, it was brought up, and it has been on future agenda items, and we've kept on pushing it. I know, I mean, for example, not just yourself, but Kevin had asked for that to, be discussed, because we were at that 2-year mark. So it's definitely not a new thing. What I will say, though, is, I mean, we have put a disclaimer now on future agenda items, that these are for planning purposes only.
My
So-
understanding is it was in the newspaper that it was going to be on the, and it's not something, well, I think I missed a meeting because I was in the hospital, and then so, I don't know.
So it's, I mean, basically, I can tell you what, what we are doing in agenda planning, and Mary Ann's there often too, is anytime it's a topic that it's not led by staff, then we go through who needs to be notified, what documents do they need to create, let's make sure that they're ready. So that being said, maybe a way that we can make sure if something's on there that shouldn't be, is that agenda, that draft agenda gets to council by the Friday, because we have till Monday at 5 PM. So as
So we
long
need
as
to
we
check
all
it.
look at it, and at least check to see, if there's something on there or not on there, then we can catch that in time.
Okay. Well, it's not going to be something we're discussing at the next
So do you want that
meeting.
taken
That should come off, yep.
Well,
And I'm not, and it's going to be, we're going to talk about it at the JSTF. I mean, I'm going to be putting something together with Lisa. And we'll be getting input from JSTF. And then I don't know if it'll be ready so that'll be, it probably will not be ready until at least July.
Okay, so the other thing I've been thinking about is, so we could either put it on July 16th, again, as a holding place.
Okay,
You want to do that?
yeah.
Okay.
Can we put utility affordability proposal on July 2nd?
Yes.
And I don't know the appetite of council to talk about this, but I've been thinking so much about the discussion at the last meeting when Mayor Canine was making those really good points about the newness and the 2-year term of the mayor. I keep thinking about that. Of course, mayors, can get reelected and reelected and reelected, but, I mean,
Yeah, it is.
it does, 2-year term on a mayor, I know I'm the new kid, but that just doesn't make sense to me. Do we want to talk about that?
That would be a charter thing, would it?
Yes.
It would be a
Yeah,
charter
it would be
amendment, yeah.
My recommendation would be, would we have our last charter review, I think 3 or 4 years ago? Typically, they're done, some communities do it 5 years, others do it at 10, but that would be a discussion at the logical setting of the charter review.
Okay.
And we can also do a targeted charter review, right? I
Yes.
mean, we don't have to open up the whole thing, we could just.
That's correct.
Right,
You
'cause
could have
if
as
we're
part
gonna-
of a
if we're gonna
council
do vote
discussion.
16.
yeah. And we did say 5 years, and it would be coming up relatively soon anyway, so it wouldn't be a real.
I would like to talk about that.
Well, and I would add this on that, not to belabor the point, but I've had a reason to go back through some of the minutes and some of our notes from that charter review. There were a couple items that we'd left open that
Yep.
I would recommend that we take a look. It would not be a broad-based look, because I think we did a thorough job, but there would be some other items that I would say that we should probably look at. And I think we could do it at a council-level discussion. I'm not sure that we would need to convene a charter review committee the way we did last time,
Right.
because it had been over a decade since it had been last done.
Yeah, that sounds good.
And then if there's changes, that will go on the ballot.
Yes.
Yes.
They have to go on the ballot. Okay, anything else?
Yes, I have a bunch of things. Well, first of all, we talked about talking more about the vote 16 and gun control.
Yep.
So when do we want to do that?
Maybe we leave that, let's think about that maybe. But I guess it probably should not wait beyond one of the next two meetings. So,
I mean, I'm just,
Yeah.
and then some statement about our public records request policy and however,
and transparency and our commitment to that.
where is the public records request policy?
I wouldn't be surprised if it's posted on the website, but I haven't looked at that yet. But I could prepare something and take a look at that, because I know Patty's plate is full, so I can.
Would you, I'd be happy, I'd like to look at what it says and think about writing maybe I'd like to see what it says. Could you send that to people? Are people okay with me looking at it and then making some suggestion about how we,
Yep.
what we do about it?
Well, Mary Ann, I can coordinate that with you. Just,
Okay.
and if we need Patty, then we'll engage her. But again, I mean, I know how busy she is, so.
Yeah.
I can
was
find some
talking
time
to
for that.
You, Chris.
Oh, okay,
not
good.
Patty.
All right. Yes, Patty's out of the mix. That's good.
Yeah, we're in a line here.
Yes.
I'll get my
So
head
the-
out of the way.
Okay, you do that.
Me too.
Get under the table.
Doug?
Then the landlord utility notice thing. Do we want to put that in with the whole utility discussion or take that separately?
I think they're separate issues. I think they're related, but I mean, we had a quite lengthy discussion the last time, and so I think that if we get even close to that discussion this time, it needs to be by itself.
Yes, and I'd also brought that up a couple of months ago as part of the overall utility recommendation, and so I can resurrect that. And again, I mean, that was the research that we did when we found out at that point, I'd recommended that there be a delay in notification so that people had a chance to get caught up. But then I found out there already was a delay. So I guess it's the delay versus never notification.
It's about who's responsible for, it's actually a bigger question. Who's responsible for the bill?
So I think it's a separate topic.
Okay, well, I guess, yeah, and I guess I'd like to, a couple of these topics just reserve because this revisiting of goals is, I think, a priority.
Yeah, that's what, well, do we want to have another retreat or how do we want to do that? 'Cause
Well-
that was the next thing I had on my list.
I mean, I think it'd be nice if we did it here at a council meeting, because I know whenever we come to goals, there's
Yeah.
that sort of citizen interest. But it's gonna be hard, I mean, it's hard to carve out a substantial amount of time, with some of the
So
other.
I
goals.
When
have
are you-
That and the village manager search process, which I think we should start.
Oh, yeah.
I think we should start having a discussion about it.
So when are you talking about putting that goals review?
I'd like to do that at our next meeting as well.
I mean,
But-
if there's any of this other stuff that can wait and to give that enough time.
Mhm.
Or July.
The other option is July 2nd, I think. And when did you said Patrick was coming?
Well, right now, he is scheduled
August
for
20th.
August 20th.
Not July 2nd.
So it's not July 2nd then? Okay.
Right now, the only thing on July 2nd that I have is the utility affordability proposal.
All right, well, let's put goals there, because I think the housing discussion's gonna be a big one at the next meeting. So so then we should be able to slot in a couple of these other topics.
What about the village manager search process? And I mean, we could just take maybe 10 minutes to decide how we want to move it forward
Mm-hmm.
at a public.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to do that July 2nd too?
Sure.
Village managers.
So then, could we make the landlord utility responsibility discussion for the 16th? Because I feel like, you know, when we've tried to put two big topics together,
Yep, I'm with you.
it's really tough. Okay. Sounds great. So, anything else? I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved?
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
I never looked at these damn things, but you mentioned that the grant,
I do,
the utility grant.
even a tall one.